मनी शंकर अय्यर बहुत कुछ पाकिस्तान के बारे में जानते हैं, लेकिन मैं नहीं समझता हूँ कि जब मैं कांग्रेस को बुलाता हूँ पाकिस्तान पर चर्चा करने के लिए, उनको क्यों नहीं भेजा जाता? Stop. He finished us.
You disobeyed the Prime Minister.
My phone rang at 5 a.m. The Prime Minister wants to talk to you. And Narasimha Rao came on the line, and his voice sounded as if he'd been crying. And in mid-sentence, he said, they're betraying me. What do I do, Mani?
Narsimha Rao, you've said, was not a man of action.
He was a man of the most perverse kind of thought.
What are the views on Atal Bihari Vajpayee?
He was a very good man in the wrong party.
Babri Masjid, because that hits us in 1992.
My goodness. My phone is ringing.
You think they're listening? It's the center? Yeah, because I heard stories about in the old days, they would fight and argue and then all take lunch together. And
Rahul arrived a few minutes later and said, "Oh, so you're joining the BJP."
And then we had the Harshad Mehta Scam.
So I suddenly realized that I'd left a top secret document with the wrong Manmohan Singh.
Oh.
So I went back to Dr. Manmohan Singh's house and I started explaining this to him. And he said, my house may be bugged.
Politicians all over India crossing party lines all the time.
I'm not a politician all over India. I'm a maverick in politics. And I'm in the Congress party only because...
Off camera, I get Mani to talk even more candidly.
What happens to Mani Shankar Aiyar is a minor footnote in history. Restoring Nehruvian India is our major objective, and whatever the price to be paid for that, I'm ready to pay.
Cyrus Says, and perhaps we've got the most intellectual person to sit on this chair with me so far, and that's 1,500 episodes. Well, William Dalrymple might be a little upset because I think he thinks of himself as a quintessential intellectual. But Mani Shankar Aiyar, firstly, what do we call you?
Call me Mani.
I can call you Mani.
Yeah.
Just that I've not had a good year financially. So that rings a bell.
Just get the spelling right.
Yeah, this GG thing has to stop. You politicians and the film industry, they just go on with the GG. They still do, right?
Well, it's...
What will they call you when you're in active politics?
They call me Mani. I have very few GGs in my life.
Oh, you don't allow
it.
But
I have to call the others Rahul ji and Priyanka ji and so forth.
Starting right there, Mani.
All that is part of the protocol.
Oh. Are you serious? But what happens to the whole age thing? I mean, you're,
I know, but there's also status, no?
Oh, is it? I don't know if you're being funny or being real.
Well, we just have to add the word G because others add it.
Oh.
And so we just follow.
Then Mani, just keeping with the protocol, I'm Cyrus G.
Sure.
Please, I won't feel comfortable otherwise.
Okay, Cyrus G.
Wow. Okay, so it's... and the word maverick in politics, maverick, I was just trying to figure out, would translate into unconventional, individualistic sort of personality.
That's right. There was a chap called Sam Maverick who wouldn't brand his cows. So all his cows got stolen. And because his name was Sam Maverick, a maverick became somebody who does his own thing, sometimes succeeds and most of the time fails. So I thought that description fitted me perfectly.
No, I think I love this description. I dare say I want to take it for myself as well. So I don't like following, other people and doing things, including red lights. I'm sorry, Mom. We're going to have to pay a lot of fines to understand that. Color red, stop. Color green. It's like racism. They come together with these strange color things and formations. But what a colorful life it's been in politics. You've done the whole gamut. From diplomacy to active politician to trying to change things to having made some impressions here and there. And I've sat and wrote down notes because it's an exhaustive book. Can I first say, I talk a lot, Mani, as you know, and please cut me whenever you feel like. My father, not there anymore, was a huge fan of yours. And he would make us read your columns.
Oh.
Only because he said, now this is a man who can speak English. And to better yourself, I remember his two favorites were you and V. Gangadhar, who was a bit of a satirist. And sometimes wrote about cricket as well. But I do remember right now, off the bat, that when Rajiv Gandhi tragically passed away, that column that you wrote, which ends with lines from Hamlet, "Good night, sweet prince," and "Flights of angels."
The goodbye, sweet prince.
Yeah.
And may a flight of angels lead thee to thy rest. And it was
so
panned by this Navleen Singh.
Why?
I just don't understand.
I had a tear in my eye, and I had no connection with Rajiv Gandhi.
And you express your... You can't find the words to say how sad you are, so you pick on Shakespeare, and then you get panned for it. Rubbish.
How can they pan you? It was such a beautiful, poignant line. And I remember reading it and thinking, wow, spot on. And the ability to get the reference to context and all. So, Dad was a huge fan. And if you were active
but
in
you must have been about 12 at the time.
It doesn't matter. Parsi family. At 12, you have to read what you have to read. With the Parsi Taliban. It's another world altogether. Yeah. But he would have voted for you if you were in active politics. And so would I. Quite frankly, so would the room. So would you like to come back?
Thank you. I'll come back.
Start your own party? the Aiyar party. All right. Let's dive into the book a little bit. I think it begins with obviously the aftermath of that tragic incident that happened which changed your life. And I must say that every line that I've read where you've mentioned Rajiv Gandhi, the praise has been effusive and very top of the line. There's no question of any ambiguous thought process there. You really, just quickly on him, I know there are many books written on him by you, the Rajiv I knew, etc. But just a couple of lines. You thought this was a real quality individual.
We were at school together.
But junior.
But he was very junior to me.
It's a nice thing you've written.
He was very, very junior to me.
Then,
But I never got the impression that there was any quality in him which would have brought him to any prominence. And then when he became an airline pilot, I thought, well, that was it. But when I joined him, I was called into the Prime Minister's office about a month after he'd had that enormous victory. I found a man who was always, his mind was working. I mean, he'd see a pump and he'd say to me, this hand pump has cost 2,000 rupees to dig. But we don't provide for a 5 rupee washer, with the result that it doesn't work.
Oh, is it?
And how can we get it to work? And he comes to the idea of Panchayati Raj, that if the village is empowered to be able, and given the money, to be able to buy the washer, then the hand pump will work. But if you have to depend on the BDO for the hand pump to be installed and then for the washer to be bought, then you're back to the well because there's nobody to help you. So this kind of a thing. And
this was not known about him.
I was also surprised that so many of the things that were of interest to me, which were rather maverick thoughts as far as the Foreign Service was concerned, without talking to me, he was in the same league. So when I found that Rajiv wanted very sincerely to improve our relations with both these neighbors, I was very excited. And it so happened that in the year I was appearing for my when I was in my college doing my economics honors, we were taught about Panchayati Raj there. I thought it was a super idea. And then I was posted in the Foreign Service to Brussels. And when I went to Brussels, I found that a small little municipality of about 1 million people is administered by 19 different communes.
But no Indians. No Indians in Brussels at that point.
At that point, there was one, Malcolm something or the other. But there weren't many Indians. But these communes were so self-sufficient that I was once arrested by one commune which was next door to mine. And I said because I was driving a car without a number plate and I'd left my identity card at home.
How Delhi of you.
So I told him, you just come to my home. It's just 500 yards from here. And he says, but this is not Etterbeek and that is Ixelles. So I had to sit in the guy's room till 6 o'clock in the morning when he felt ready to ring the Ixelles police and ask whether I actually lived at 109 Chaussée de Vlergat.
Wow.
So I was very thrilled with that. And I then lived in a commune called Boisfort. And they went back to when they were a village in the 11th century and produced the most beautiful brochures to give you a sense of pride that you are here. And I saw a young man standing before me in the queue at Dover who was asked what his nationality was. He was Belgian, but because his football club, Anderlecht, was one of the best football clubs in Europe, he answered, I'm Anderlecht. So this kind of pride in your community, and
But
therefore
they also had
keeping
that
it clean.
Flemish. They have their own separatism to deal with, right? The Flemish population, the Dutch-speaking
Yeah,
population.
that's funny.
So we don't know.
It's a country which is severely divided between the Flamand and the Wallon. And the Communist Party of Belgium is got two different parties, not two different wings. One Flemish Communist Party and one Wallon Communist Party, like every other political party in Belgium.
Why didn't you tell Mr. Yechuri this while he was around? Because maybe they needed more options in communist India.
Well, the thing is that they still remain a country because they're all allowed their own identity. And I think we have a lot to learn from that. Unless you let a Tamil be a Tamil and a Sikh be a Sikh and a Muslim be a Muslim, how can you get them to then agree to being Indians?
Let me understand. Are you trying to say do not homogenize everybody into one
Absolutely
breed of
not.
Indian, Desi, Hindi-speaking, 7 scriptures, 5, classes of society?
If you do that, if you try unity through uniformity, you'll fail. If you try unity through diversity, you'll succeed. And the example I give is of Pakistan. I lived there for 3 years. I've been back to Pakistan 40 times in the last 40 years.
Wow.
It's a country I feel we need to understand. And I see that because they thought they could bring uniformity through Islam, they didn't realize that a Sindhi Muslim is a Sindhi.
First.
A Punjabi Muslim is a Punjabi.
Correct.
A frontier Muslim is a Pathan. A Baloch Muslim is a Baloch. And these identities are necessary to respect if the other identity of being a Muslim and therefore a Pakistani is to receive any recognition. That's how they lost half their country.
Wow. So Manmohan Singh, our famous filmmaker, was right back in the 80s with his films. But today I think there's too much homogeneity being pushed by Bollywood. Bollywood, back off. I think there's still hope, Mani Shankar Aiyar. I think you can start your own party. We'll come to that, the whole situation within the grand old party, etc. But going back to the book, after this period in your life, obviously life-changing period for you, then you win the elections in Tamil Nadu, right? And you come back to power, or you come to power there. And then
not power, become an MP.
Well,
which is where you discover that you don't have any
power. Yeah. So once you get there, the Kaveri Water thing started in that period of time?
What
the
started?
The dispute, the Kaveri Water dispute with Karnataka?
The Kaveri dispute was settled in the month of June. I was elected in June.
Yeah.
And the Kaveri Tribunal gave its interim award. But the Narasimha Rao's government would not gazette it. And then eventually when he gazetted it, the Karnataka was under the Congress. And therefore he couldn't lay too much pressure on the Congress party. And the Congress in Karnataka just said they're not accepting it. And that was when I discovered that party politics and national politics and what is national interest, what is party interest, where does the state come in, all these complications are part of democracy. And it is in reconciling these, it's taken a good 40 years after after the interim award, for the settlement to be now made. And there's no settlement. It's just that they agreed that if there is a shortage of monsoon rain, then we should get together and see what can be done.
What would have been your idea if you were alone allowed to make a decision here?
Well, being
back in 1990,
being a Tamil and being from the Kaveri Delta, I wanted a settlement where the water being given to us was not as generous as under the 1924 treaty. But that is exactly what the interim award did. It slashed our entitlement in Tamil Nadu from about 600,000 metric cubic feet, TMCFT, from 600 to 400, we thought to 400, but they cut it down to 200. But what they did was, they said the 200 will have to be divided in January so much, February so much, March so much, so that when the water was needed, we would get it. And when it was not needed, because the place was being flooded anyway, at that time, they needn't supply it. But what Karnataka did was, when we needed it, they wouldn't supply it. And when we didn't, when we were flooded, they would flood us with more.
This is a show to make friends. Yeah. But it's a tough one. You're quantifying how much water
But I think now, it was quantified down to the last cubic feet.
Yeah.
And now I think we seem to have arrived at an understanding that confrontation or other people making arbitral awards is not the way forward. You just have to move from crisis to crisis by getting together and saying, look, we also need to live and we agree that you have to live. So therefore, let's settle. In the days of the Maharaja of Mysore, they didn't have much productive agriculture in the Deccan area, which constitutes most of Karnataka. And the Delta area, which is where the British first came in. They came into India through Tanjore. So they came in through my village, more or less.
You guys let them in.
Well,
then why did you let them out?
My ancestors did.
Yeah. Hence you speak perfect English. See, that all makes sense. Yeah.
But one consequence of that is that the main difference between the British Indian Army, or the army set up by the East India Company, and our Maharajas and Nawabs, was that we had an army supply corps. And the army supply corps required accountants. So when I was reading a book on the Indian Army called A Matter of Honor, I couldn't understand what this word konikopolis that they were using frequently meant. I said, what could be the Tamil equivalent? And then ruminating on that, it occurred to me that this is the British way of saying Kanakka Pillai, which means accountant. So the accountants had to be recruited. The accountants recruited were the Brahmins because they were the literate ones, which is why the IA and AS today is called the Indian Aiyar and Iyengar Service.
Oh, is it?
So that tradition continues. My father was a chartered accountant. So that is the curious origin.
So you did a lot of, you made the British into a richer state in a sense with your good accounting, or maybe not. We don't know. There's no accounting for it.
No, it was interesting that because they were accountants and they knew figures, but they didn't know the language. So the first generation of these Brahmins who got into effectively government service with the East India Company.
This was the actual IAS.
They started learning English, and then they became excellent in English. And by the middle of the 19th century, they were so good in English that they had read John Stuart Mill. And they turned around and said to the Brits, if you're so proud of being liberal in your country, why can't we have liberalism here? So the British turned against the Brahmins, which is how the Justice Party in about 1910 started emerging. And in the 1920s was so powerful that when my father graduated in 1927, he found that being a Brahmin, he would find it very difficult to find a job. So he got onto a train and dropped it where it stopped. It was Lahore. And an Iyer had preceded him, which is why I belong to this. I was born in Lahore, and I belong to the smallest minority in India. I'm a Tamil Brahmin refugee from Pakistan.
So technically you're British Pakistani. I'm just looking at your antecedents before you're Hindustani as well. Yeah. Is that why your Hindi and Urdu is also quite good?
No, it's more because I went back to Pakistan, to Karachi. I was posted as our first ever Consul General. And I had a background in Hindustani, but over there, everyone, including our class, which speaks English in India, they tend to speak Urdu among themselves there. So I was exposed to a lot of Urdu. It's a beautiful language. And therefore my Hindi came really into Urdu, so much so that once when I spoke in Parliament in my first term, in what I thought was Hindi. I was astonished when the transcript came, all written in Urdu, because I'd used so many Urdu words.
Wow. Yeah, master of language. There's no doubt about that.
No,
Yeah.
but now my Hindi has got Hindi eyes.
No, you come to Mumbai, you lose it. I've written this theory. You want to destroy any language, come to Mumbai. We'll kill it for you. We do it for free. No, but I know this theory is correct, and there's a lot of back and forth with data and all that. But there's some people who have that linguistic ability, and some people who don't, where they can pick up language, they can refine their language, and some people just don't have that ability.
Yeah, well, I speak badly several languages, and I think my English is okay.
Oh, wow. If your English is okay, then I don't know. The language is completely finished as far
I
as I'm
also
concerned.
learnt a lot of French and have used a lot of French in my work.
You did while we were having this conversation. I couldn't understand a word he was saying. The references to the Belgian this and that. I mean, it just sounded Frenchy. The waffle and the parfum, really. Yeah. Okay, stop showing off our money. I look very bad in front of you. Among the challenges you mentioned in the beginning, if I remember correctly, one is, of course, Babri Masjid, because that hits us in
My
1992.
goodness. My phone is ringing.
You think they're listening? It's the center? All right. So we had a small interruption here. I was a little worried in case somebody's listening from, you've got all kinds of friends and all kinds of enemies in politics. Yeah. Sometimes they become the same thing, a crossover. No, so Babri Masjid was right there while you were serving your term, in the sense, of course, you were in Tamil Nadu, but 1992, December, and you've... I don't know how... you read the book. I don't want to give everything away. Please buy the book. I don't want him to say everything as well. But Narasimha Rao, you've said, was a little... please correct me if I'm wrong. Was not a man of action and refused to...
He was a man of the most perverse kind of thought. He had one of my... I was running a society called the Society for Secularism. And one of my deputies said to him that to counter L.K. Advani's Rath Yatra, he should march with the entire opposition from South Block to India Gate. And Narasimha Rao pouted and said, "You want me to walk 1 kilometer to counter his 1,000 kilometers?" So when this story reached my ear, I said, why don't I do a yatra along the route that mythologically, at any rate, Ram and Sita took, which was from Rameshwaram to Ayodhya. So I undertook a 44-day yatra by jeep from Rameshwaram to Ayodhya. At least I was trying to get to Ayodhya. When I arrived in Orissa, in Behrampur, I got a message from Mr. Narasimha Rao asking me to come back to Delhi, but I told the yatra to continue and I would rejoin.
You disobeyed the Prime Minister?
He was Prime Minister.
You disobeyed him?
No, I didn't. I told the yatra to continue.
So you left?
But I flew to Delhi. I met him and he began by saying, Mani, I don't have any objection to your yatra, but your definition of secularism I can't accept.
Yeah,
I said,
it's in the
really,
book,
sir?
yeah.
What's wrong with my definition of secularism? And he said, you don't seem to understand that this is a Hindu country. So I looked at him amazed. I said, but that's what the BJP says.
Yeah.
And he didn't have a comeback to that. But when he had thought that he'd done a deal, and his idea of a deal was to get Congress sadhus and sants in to talk to Advani and the sadhus and sants that Advani was bringing. And then after the Babri Masjid fell, so I'm stepping a few weeks away, he then addressed the Congress Parliamentary Party. And he said to us that in the old days, the Rajas, the Maharajas, would always consult with sadhus and saints. But he said the sad thing about the current era is that I consulted them, but then they didn't follow me. So I said, is this a man from the 12th century or the 21st century? So I remarked that Narasimha Rao has proved that death is not a necessary condition for rigor mortis to set in. Because he just did nothing on that day. And yet, a few days before the 6th of December, it's such an important event in my life that I remember the date. It was the 3rd of December. My phone rang at 5 a.m. I wondered who was calling me at 5. I picked it up and the voice at the other end said, "The Prime Minister wants to talk to you." And Narasimha Rao came on the line and his voice sounded as if he'd been crying. And in mid-sentence, he said, they're betraying me. What do I do, Mani? So I said, "Sir, can I come over?" He said, "Can you come now?" I said, "Well, within 20 minutes. And I fetched up. And when I fetched up, he was recovered. And he said, "Now what do I do?" I said, "It's too late. You've allowed these people to
4 lakh Karsevaks almost at the border
to come in.
Yeah.
So it's too late now. But what you might do is to organize a counter demonstration either at the Faizabad Circuit House or in the Faizabad airport. I said preferably do it at the airport, and you bring in convoys of non-BJP MPs. During the day, they come, they land, they speak, they go away, the next lot comes, those speak. And in the meanwhile, Doordarshan in a helicopter is showing these Gunda types at Ayodhya and the statesmen of India at the Faizabad airport. And then you come in on the last day, at the last hour, and then deliver yourself of a major speech as the Prime Minister of India. And he said, "I agree, but on one condition." So I said, "Sir?" He said, "Will you write my speech?" So I said, "Of course I will." And I gave it to him. And then
you had to call him to write the same day as
you.
you.
Saw what happened on the 6th. So then I asked Ramu Damodaran, who was his... I said, "I gave him a draft. What happened to it?" So then he looked around and he said, "We found it in his bed. It was under a pillow." So he seems to have read it, put it away, and then decided that the Maun Vrat was the right answer to the destruction of the Babri Masjid. Of course, later he took action. He dismissed all the BJP governments. There were by-elections. He won most of them. And then he said he would try and do things. He set up the Libahan Commission. And instead of the Libahan Commission finishing its job in 3 or 4 months, they took 12 years. And by that time, nobody was interested in the subject. So the Lucknow bench of the Allahabad High Court said that nothing has been proved against Mr. Advani.
What can we say? Just going back to Narasimha Rao, so in your opinion, he basically... What was the reason for the inactivity or the lack of decisive at the right time?
At that time, his nerve failed him. But he did take action afterwards. But it was too late. I mean, the masjid was down. He had his paratroopers between Faizabad and Ayodhya. It's a very short distance. He should have declared president's rule as soon as he found that Kalyan Singh had violated his oath to the Supreme Court, where he had said that the car seva would only be cleaning the place and so forth, not the destruction of the masjid. So when the destruction of the masjid started, and it took them several hours to break down all the domes, had the paratroopers been sent in, there would have been blood, but at least their presence would have deterred what was happening. The fact that he took no action whatsoever, other than apparently sit in his puja room and pray for some deliverance, it was very sad what happened. And the consequence of that has been dreadful for our country, because it opened the path to the present dispensation. And the present dispensation has succeeded in somehow going to the dregs of India's character, or the character of Indians. And it's going to take us a long time to recover from these 10 years, at least to recover completely. We were on the right path until 2014, when we were keeping this country together on the principle of unity in diversity, saying that this is our civilizational ethos. In the last 10 years, that has been destroyed, or attempts have been made to destroy it. But I personally, and in my book I've said so, I feel optimistic that 5,000 years of absorption, assimilation, synthesis will eventually prevail. That we will find, at least in the next generation, that the Modi period was a transient period, and that the period of a secular India was really a reflection of the character of our country and our people.
I have a very simple approach to this to solve all these issues. We remove religion for 20 years from the country. We don't have any. And names should be removed as well because that leads to caste and everything else. Everyone should have a number. Because we're a country which is very good with statistics and numbers. Aryabhatta and etc., Brahmagupta, all these people. So I'm saying just all of us are numbered from 1 to 1.5 billion, whatever the hell we are. We'll be great. Imagine you're in love with, I'm in love with 1.6, 780,000, whatever.
With a name like Mani Shankar Aiyar, people have difficulty remembering it. Yeah. How will they remember my name in about 12 different
But at least
or 15
I'm
different
removing
digits?
hatred. It's a bit of a headache, but you can WhatsApp it and keep it with you like that. We'll have our own Aadhaar cards or versions of that in the future. All right, we'll take a quick break and then come back. So much to talk about. I won't be able to squeeze all the different points I've written down here. But the book is called A Maverick in Politics. A very interesting man who's seen it all. He's seen it all and doesn't care to be told what to do anymore. So he's written all in a book. And he's written from the heart. It's his experiences as well as his views and philosophies. When we come back, the one and only Mani Shankar Aiyar.
Thank you.
Hey, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Cyrus Says, Cyrus and Gajraj Rao discusses Dua Lipa's SRK moves, Vikrant Massey's retirement, Pakistan's ICC model, Aditya Thackeray's bold remarks. On A Century of Stories, Kunal reveals the fascinating history of India's first commercial airport, the Juhu Aerodrome. On Paisa Vaisa, Anupam Gupta talks to Satish Mehta about his journey and expert tips on managing credit and improving your credit score.
Back here after the break, off camera, I get Mani to talk even more candidly. But out of fear, I have to keep that for our special private blackmailing session. We call up friends and family. But it's a book everybody should read. It covers the period from 1991 to 2024. This is a man who's been in every form of, capacity of, from statesman to diplomat and everything in between, from, having a vision to increase or better society, as well as just trying to get neighboring countries to be friends, which apparently is a much tougher task than people know. We'll come to as much as we can in the next half an hour that we have. But I'll go back to that same period. You were dealing with this, Babri Masjid, which continues to stay in the background, whether we like it or not. And then we had the Harshad Mehta scam, which you talk about quite effusively as well.
Well, it was the same year.
It was 92. The same year. And because I'm going back, I was a very young man. It was huge for us, especially being Mumbaikars in the stock market, etc., and all that. So take us through the Harshad Mehta moments, which changed India also.
It was clear that there had been inadequate attention paid to what was happening in the stock market. And here was a bull, he was called the Big Bull, who came in from Raipur of all places and proved himself to be a master at predicting and then ensuring that stocks that were bought just rose in price.
To the roof.
And he'd become so important to the Indian middle class that India Today ran a cover story on him. Then suddenly it all collapsed. So when it collapsed, unfortunately, Dr. Manmohan Singh, as finance minister, said that he does not lose sleep over volatility in the stock market. And the opposition caught that. And they were determined that whatever they were able to prove or not prove on the Harshad Mehta scam, that they would slaughter him for having said this. So I was one of the very few in the committee who was committed to defending Dr. Manmohan Singh, because he's clearly such an honest man. And if there were a mistake, it was a mistake of administration.
It was a slightly flippant statement saying, that
I was
belittling the stock markets.
But what had happened was that all the regulation of the stock market, which was being at that time done by the Ministry of Finance, at the bureaucratic level, there's a very fascinating book which I've quoted at great length, written by a schoolfellow of mine who happened to be the director of the Enforcement Directorate. His name was Javed Chowdhury, was because he's no more. He wrote a book called The Insider's View, and he slams the reformers who were so keen on their reforms that they didn't see the downside of it. And the downside of it was that since the minister and since the political system and since Mumbai as a city in particular wanted to see the stock market going up, nobody was asking how is it going up. And it was discovered that every kind of bank, from the State Bank of India to private banks, including private foreign banks, that were giving money, allowing banking resources to be deployed by Harshad Mehta on a privileged basis in the stock market, which is completely against the law, and then closing their eyes to it because if they opened it, then the stock market would crash. At that time, it was very odd that the chairman, who was a congressman, and some congressmen, particularly S.S. Ahluwalia, seemed more determined than the opposition members to undermine Dr. Manmohan Singh. And when we had finished the interrogations and were getting down to drafting, and I found that my changes of draft were sometimes being laughed out of court by congressmen, not by opposition, I thought I should go and see the Prime Minister. I was driving past Dr. Manmohan Singh's house when I decided to turn in. And I told him that I think there are elements working against you. I'm going to see the Prime Minister, and when I finished with him, I'll come back and see you and tell you what he had to say. So Dr. Manmohan Singh said, I'm very grateful to you. Thank you very much. And I went. And I got a very sympathetic hearing from the Prime Minister. So I thought I'd done my duty. But as I was exiting, he had an aide called Bhuvanesh Chaturvedi, who had been standing at the doorway listening to the entire conversation. And as I passed him, he pulled me, he said, "Yahan aao." He pulled me into his little room cubicle. And he says, you handle what is your job. Don't do other things. So I saw then that there was a conspiracy on, that the scam had caused such a noise that the Prime Minister had to be protected.
Oh.
And so
He was a fall guy.
some Congress guys had been recruited to save the Prime Minister's image
And
by
then- okay.
passing all the blame on
To
the
Manmohan Singh, the
finance
fall
minister.
guy. Yeah.
So I went back to Dr. Manmohan Singh's house and I started explaining this to him.
Sorry.
So then he asked me to come out into
Did
the
he actually
lawn.
do that?
Huh?
Did he actually do this?
Yeah, he did that. And then he took me out to the lawn.
Yeah.
And he said, my house may be bugged. So he's brought me out because you can't bug trees and so forth.
Right.
And he asked me to tell him what happened in the Prime Minister's house. And then the irony of it, because I got so many things cut out and so much written into it, which blamed the RBI, which created a high-level committee on capital markets, which blamed the banks and so on and so forth. So we exposed the whole scam. But because these guys wanted to bring Manmohan Singh's sleep into the matter, at the end of the day, they put in the typically Indian expression, in a lighter vein. So they had in a lighter vein, and I couldn't object to that. We wish the finance minister very sound sleep, but not when the stock market is being volatile, something like that. And Dr. Manmohan Singh got very upset at that. So Murli Devra, who was one of the few who was actually supporting me in this losing battle, he told me that, yaar, wo doctor sahab bahut naraz hai. So I said, why? He says, you've let him down, and he thinks I've also let him down. So I went to see Dr. Manmohan Singh, and he was very angry. So he thought that it was not the people at fault, but we for not being able to remove that sentence. So anyway, he's a very nice man. He's a very honorable man. So he has always said to me that we have ideological differences, but we respect each other. So I've known him now for a long, long time. I first met him, if I may tell the story,
Please.
Although it's from a previous book, in 1971, on the 16th of December, even as the surrender documents were being signed in Dhaka, I was made, as an undersecretary in the economic division, the secretary of a committee that was set up specially under Shukumar Chakravarti's chairmanship to rush relief supplies to newly liberated Bangladesh, and so that they would take back their refugees. And therefore, I was in Bangladesh all over the place in the first 7 or 8 months of 1972, a great deal. And among those I met was a man called Rahman Subhan, who was to Bangladesh what Dr. Manmohan Singh was to become to India. And I said to Rahman Subhan that should we not have a jute study group? J-U-T.
Yeah.
So we set up this, and I came back to India, and I asked Dr. Manmohan Singh, who's an economic advisor in the Commerce Ministry, and I'd heard that his doctoral thesis had dealt with the jute business. So I asked him, and he agreed. So I wrote out a brief. And he lived at that time in Model Town. As a Bombay wala, you perhaps don't know where Model Town is.
But I'll pretend to.
Model Town in Delhi is the far end. It's beyond the university, in the northern end of Delhi. So I then took it to his house. I asked, where does Manmohan Singh ji live? And they said, here. So I went in there and I handed over. I said, ki Dr. Saab hai yahan, ye Manmohan Singh Saab. He said, nahi, wo bahar gaye hain. So I left the envelope marked top secret and I came away. And next day we flew via Calcutta to Dhaka. And at Calcutta airport, a very sour-looking Dr. Manmohan Singh was sitting there. And I said to him, sir, have you had the opportunity of looking at our brief? And he said, I've received no brief. So I suddenly realized that I'd left a top secret document with the wrong Manmohan Singh.
Oh.
So then my heart went into fortunately we had another copy. So I was able to hand it over to him. And he read it between Calcutta and Dhaka and then was very nice to me. But when we came back, Peter Sinai, my director, and I, we drove out to Model Town and went into the same house. And a very old man with a very long white beard, he came out holding this envelope and saying, somebody is running a conspiracy against me. ये कोई आया यहाँ और top secret मुझको ये दिया. I was so grateful when I took it from him.
He had nothing to do with politics or anything.
Nothing to do with. He had nothing to do with Dr. Manmohan Singh.
Fairly common. Yeah. Oops. Ouch. Yeah. Okay. Before we run out of time, I want to get into not juicy bits, but interesting bits are your views and interactions with certain people. You there's one interaction where you mentioned Vajpayee, and you, I thought you were quite. You praised him and said nice things about him, and the fact that he had a sense of humor over a particular remark that had transpired between a senior colleague from his side. So let's. What are the views on Atal Bihari Vajpayee?
He's a very good man in the wrong party. He kept trying to reflect his party's views and was such a miserable failure in being an RSS man that Govind Acharya dismissed him as a mukhota. The greatest influence on Vajpayee's mind was Jawaharlal Nehru. And he combined that with an impish sense of humor. The story you referred to is when Yasser Arafat came to India in 1994. I had just at that time written an article on Murli Manohar Joshi's Ekta Yatra, which was a dreadful failure. Anyway, I had described him as the Hindu Jinnah. So when we were in the Rashtrapati Bhavan, waiting for Yasser Arafat to come, the practice was that the chief guest would be brought by the chief protocol, who would mumble your name and he'd shake your hand and move to the next. So Vajpayee ji was ahead of me in that sense by being on my left. But suddenly Arafat walked to the head of the hall. So our line had to be converted into a queue. So when it was converted into a queue, I was standing in front of Atal Bihari ji. So I told Atal Bihari ji, no, sir, please come in front of me. He says, oh, let it be. After all, who am I? I'm just a follower of a Hindu Jinnah. That's amazing that he should look at that headline and think it's funny. Because nowadays, these people would take it so seriously. Kya hame Jinnah keh rahe hain? But he had a sense of humor.
But do you think...
And I always ribbed him that he was Morarji Desai's foreign minister when I was posted to Karachi. So when I would take him on Pakistan, I invariably reminded him that it was he who got me posted to Pakistan. And he did me the honor
Very good point. Yeah.
that he would come specially to sit at his place as Prime Minister whenever I spoke on Pakistan in the assembly. And then he made a remark which had its full political significance. He said that ये मनी शंकर अय्यर बहुत कुछ पाकिस्तान के बारे में जानते हैं, लेकिन मैं नहीं समझता हूँ कि जब मैं कांग्रेस को बुलाता हूँ पाकिस्तान पर चर्चा करने के लिए, उनको क्यों नहीं भेजा जाता? Stop. He finished us with that one remark.
Very interesting point. But do you think, from what you're saying, that the parliamentarians of, say, a couple of generations before were more easygoing, friendlier, and more fun for us as public to hear the banter?
We were a democracy, Cyrus.
Yeah.
Now we are a mobocracy.
Yeah.
Because ever since the Congress was in opposition to Vajpayee and started this business of demonstrations.
Growing and just screaming.
I protested that time but was overruled because I feared that the BJP would learn this lesson much quicker than we had learnt it. And when we came into office for 10 years, we were all the time being disrupted by the BJP. And now we've reached a stage where debate doesn't take
Just
place.
walk out.
And it's all just, it's just screaming and
Screaming and
shouting.
walkouts, yeah.
And then what Vajpayee said about that was that when we protested, we would walk out. But nowadays they're walking in to the well of the house.
Yeah.
There was another incident involving him. That was when I became a minister. And I was taking my oath of office as an MP. And the practice is to go around there. You go up to the speaker's chair, get his congratulations, and then you go around to the opposition. And Vajpayee ji was sitting at his place, very far away, looking utterly miserable. So I went and touched his feet to get his blessings, merely because he looked so miserable. When I turned around and I saw this shadow of anger pass over Sonia Gandhi's face.
The Congress side, yeah.
And then I got to my office. Rahul arrived a few minutes later and said, oh, so you're joining the BJP. So I said to myself, no, I'm merely honoring somebody whom I disagree with, but whom I respect despite my disagreement.
Yeah. Yeah, because I heard stories about in the old days they would fight and argue and then all take lunch together and hang out together and the parties would be completely mixed.
Long ago, in my first term as an MP, which was 91-96, there was great bonhomie.
Yeah.
And it lasted even. One of my best friends was Arun Jaitley. I once invited him home, saying that this was after they'd come to power.
Yeah.
I said, will you come to tea with me? And to explain to him where my house was, I said, I live opposite Sushma Swaraj. So he says, oh, is that how you describe your house? I said, till the other day, it was the other way around. So we can be friends across the aisle, but not in the kind of poisonous atmosphere that has been created for the last 10 years.
If they would use more wit and less vitriol, I think it would also help the public understand it's another sport most of the time and not to take it so seriously. I mean, the way people jump parties, I'm talking about local politics here where I'm from, it's just ridiculous now. I mean, once you realize that we're quite secular because they're willing to leave their manifestos and their philosophies and everything else for a seat. So at the end of the day, what are we talking about?
That's very sad.
You mentioned Sonia Gandhi and Rahul as well, and obviously that's an up and down relationship. But
It's not an up and down relationship between them, between me and them.
Between you and them. So what's the status now? In the sense that initially in the book you mentioned she first said she's not going to be the president, blah blah blah. Then she goes somewhere else, and I think the Congress splits. Then she comes back as president. Was there a problem right from the start?
No, as far as I was concerned, she recognized that I had a good relationship with her husband. She was extremely fond of her husband. And I think he remains the pole star of her life. So when he was mercilessly assassinated, she then was very kind to me. I was sitting at the beer and the security asked me to move, and she told them, nahi inko chodo. Because she saw that I was one of the most affected by the way he died. And then she saw to it that without showing it to me, she had, as we say in Hindi, her hand on my shoulder. And it was entirely because of her that despite the absence of Rajiv Gandhi, which I'd never anticipated when I entered politics under his aegis, she would be there to backstop me. And there were many incidents, which I mentioned in my book, where only because of her, I was saved from the wrath of the party. And then at the end, when I made a minister, I thought at best I could get myself a minister of stateship. And it was she who made me a cabinet minister in the teeth of a lot of advice that was given to her that I was the wrong man and too junior to be made a minister. And then it was she who looked after me when I lost my election in 2009. It was she who brought me into the Rajya Sabha in 2010. So she played the kind of role of an ersatz Rajiv Gandhi towards me for all those years after he passed away. We're talking of a period of 19 years, from 1991 all the way to 2010. Then in 2010, she got annoyed with me. And after that, it was a complete misunderstanding. And yet she felt that I had let the side down, so she wouldn't meet me. So for many, many years, I never really got to meet her one-on-one.
But there were no mediators in between? I mean, you've got so many people in the party in between, no one could mediate?
Well, I tried talking to various people. One of them, Saifuddin Soz, who was the president of our J&K unit, he went of his own accord to her and told her that in the valley, the congressman who is most respected for his views is Mani Shankar Aiyar. So please make him the General Secretary in charge of J&K. And her response was, I can't. He's such a loose cannon.
Oh.
So therefore, I have brought a lot upon my own head. I think it's the same qualities. Somebody said to me, you have a great gift for making enemies. And I replied to him, I also have a great gift for making friends. It's the same thing. If you're extrovert, then people come towards you and people get alienated from you.
Yeah.
I have a gift of the gab.
Yeah.
Now that stands me in very good stead, but it also leads to all the verbal faux pas that causes problems.
Also, you've called yourself, quite rightly so, a maverick. And that's also, in a sense, allows you to be a loaded gun or a loose cannon or what have you. So I think, but they know that. They know that they've been around you for so many years, and they know that Mani Shankar Aiyar will speak his mind, and it'll be poetic, and sometimes profound, and sometimes hurtful. And so I wonder how they weren't able to get over that. It's almost like an ego thing.
How do I get over it?
Them, the Gandhi side.
I don't know. Because after that incident in 2010, things have
Never been the
just
same.
gone worse and worse. But at a personal level, after all, Sonia came and sat through the whole of the relays of my first volume. And in the last couple of years, she's made up for the 10 years of not seeing me by seeing me a couple of times. And in fact, when I last saw her, which was in February, just before the March election, I said to her that if we can get back my constituency, I would like to be given a ticket this time so that I'm able to complete the mission that Rajiv Gandhi entrusted to me when he allowed me to leave the Foreign Service and enter politics. And that is one last term in Parliament, because if I do get elected, and I was sure I'd get elected, I would be 88 years old by the time the term ended.
Right.
And I said, I'm not going to ask you again. And she said, yes, I agree. But then I wasn't given the ticket because Rahul Gandhi felt I was too old. And I am, in a calendar sense, old. For a 54-year-old boy, I'm 84 years old.
Yeah.
But as you can see, I walked up your stairs.
No, I totally agree with you. I think this whole thing about 58 being a retirement age or whatever, people's minds, he's too old, he's too young. The
So
age cannot be a mathematical age.
That age has not even been told to me.
Yeah.
It was told to me through others that he has said that no, he's too old. Now, he may think that because I'm 3 years older than his father, that his father would have been an old man and that therefore I'm older than him. But I don't think that's the right criterion. And so I feel sorry that I was denied the opportunity of being an MP and dying with my boots on, which is what I'd hoped I would do.
Well, there was a chance in the opposition camp, but if you were with the BJP, 75 is the cutoff, as per law. So,
So we say.
Yeah, so I'm
doesn't
just-
apply to some members.
We don't know. We don't know what will happen in the future. So last question I'll ask you. We will run out of time. Please read the book. There's lots more. There's the different hats he's worn. I want to talk about the Northeast. We won't have time for that. There's petroleum and that Iran, Pakistan, India deal, which was a huge one. There's everything, and there's lots of stuff about personalities and people from our world that exist, and have some of them not so powerful anymore, but still there if you grew up in the 80s and 90s like me. But Rahul Gandhi, we began with you saying that you have to say G and stuff, tongue in cheek or whatever.
Well, he's very particular
Really?
that we mustn't say sir to him,
Good.
that we mustn't say G to him,
Good.
that we should just call him Rahul.
I love that.
And I made the mistake once of using the term sir, and he promptly shut me down and said, don't call me sir. So I call him Rahul, I call Priyanka, but I call Sonia madam.
Okay, fair enough. Because in a sense, he was, although younger, almost like your mentor for politics, not for the foreign missions that you were on. But I think the political world is because of him, your entry into it. And as we end the interview here, read the book. It's I think Maverick is not. That's the way he describes himself. But what an interesting man! What an interesting life! Wore many hats, met so many people, has such an understanding of the country and the world, of global politics, which is also there. Just one last thing: if you had to address the Congress party as a senior statesman, the grand old party, what would you say? Where would they go from where they are now? At this very point where we are at this point.
Thank you for providing me a platform, because I have not been provided a party platform for the last 20 years. The last time I was given a party platform was the year I became a minister in 2004. But after that, and it's now 2024, it's now 20 years, I've never been allowed to address the Congress party. But if I may take your offer
Please.
as
They're
the
all listening.
platform from which I could address my own party colleagues, I would say to them, please remember that we are no longer the natural party of governance. And we will become the natural party of opposition unless we join hands with all the secular forces. And unless we concentrate on consolidating the India alliance that has been made, the India bloc, we do not have a chance to come back to office and end this awful regime that we've had for the last 10 years. But for that, we cannot say that we will be the leader. We have to stoop to conquer. It is not necessary for us to be in a leadership position in the alliance. Let the elections happen, which elections we win, and then let us see who has the largest number of seats. Now, I can easily answer that question today, but I don't want to answer it because I want us to stoop to conquer. Because if the alliance comes in, perhaps under another leader, once the alliance is there and is ready to form a coalition government, I can see no alternative to a Congress Prime Minister. And do we need a Congress Prime Minister? So long as we have a secular Prime Minister and we undo the harm that has been done to us in the last 10 years, I think we win, irrespective of the who's and the what's of persons and parties.
Are you projecting Mamta? Because again, there's the whole TMC chapter of yours. Is that what you're saying?
I think that is reason enough for me not to project her. But what I'm saying is that if to keep the India bloc together, the other aspirants to the leadership are sort of sated, are appeased, if you like, and the bloc then becomes stronger, I think it's a small sacrifice.
You take one for the team to make sure your team wins. But this is a horrible question. Not horrible question, but I want to ask it. What if the BJP offered you a ticket? Because you're always on the line of the enfant terrible, if you don't mind, etc.
I would never, ever
But politicians all over India are crossing party lines all the time.
I'm not a politician all over India. I'm a maverick in politics. And I am in the Congress party only because I was 6 years old when Nehru became the Prime Minister. I was 23 when he died. So over a period of 17 years, as I grew from being a child to an adolescent to an adult, I grew up under the influence of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru's idea of India. And I will not betray it by accepting this alternative idea of a Hindu India.
What about the moderates in the party? They have moderates as well.
Where? In the BJP?
Yeah.
They don't count. They are the Mukhotas. If even Advani can be put to one side as being too moderate and Yogi Adityanath brought in, how can I possibly join that party?
All right, then there's only one party I can welcome you into, and that's the Parsi Sena. It's a very small fragment of the Shiv Sena here in Mumbai. If the Congress doesn't want you, we welcome you with open arms.
No.
You quote Shakespeare liberally.
I don't care whether the Congress leadership accepts me or not. I am in the Congress today. I am one of 9,000 bloc representatives in the AICC. Proudly, I am the bloc representative for Kumbakonam town. And I'm content with being that until that too changes. But in the meanwhile, I think the idea of the Congress, the ideas of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the idea of India as emerges from the discovery of India is what we have to save. What happens to Mani Shankar Aiyar is a minor footnote in history. Restoring Nehruvian India is our major objective. And whatever the price to be paid for that, I'm ready to pay it.
The price is buying this book, The Maverick in Politics, which is how much? How much is that?
899 rupees.
899.
So I have 1 rupee to give back to you.
1 rupee to give back. 8.99. That's all. Nothing to it. So go ahead and buy the book. Mani Shankar Aiyar, thank you so much. Just for the record, he's come in his 80s now. He's come from Chennai, got off a plane, he's come straight here. He's having lunch and going straight back to Delhi. So he's ready for any leadership position. Congress, if you're listening. I'm quite close to Rahul.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's a very good message
I think
to
so.
send to my leadership.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, whether coming from me, whether it'll help or hinder.
It'll help, Cyrus. It'll help. For don't forget that the man who brought me into politics and enabled me to make my name was half a Parsi.
Yeah, very much. 100%. With family in Colaba, not too far away from here as we speak. Yeah. Okay, one final question. I know we've run well out of time. Shashi Tharoor or Mani Shankar Aiyar, who'd win the debate? Language debate. No, not debate on, you're on both on the same side of the
Who
fence.
has more
Power?
words?
Yes.
Oh, it's clearly Shashi Tharoor. Is the kind of thing that he does. I am not interested in adding to my vocabulary. I find my vocabulary has already exceeded the understanding of most Indians. So there's no need to learn more words.
We'll be giving you texts at the bottom here to make sure people understand. Mani Shankar Aiyar, what a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.